Hello, I'm Clint Walker, and this is Real Estate Appraiser Secrets. And today we are going to answer the question, why did the appraiser put active listings in my report? This is a real question that all my questions are real questions, but this is a real question, and I've been asked it multiple times over the course of a few years. And it's sort of, when a client or somebody asks this question, it's kind of a short answer. But I can make it a little longer for an educational video. So it always surprises me when I get asked this question because we just don't even think about it on the appraisal side anymore. It just is something that we do if the data is available. And the reason for that is that the active listings are they're your most relevant competition. So your closed sales are the most informative. They are unchanging matters of fact and they're what we typically reconcile our opinion of value to. But your active listings are important pieces of information when they exist, or it's also important sometimes to point out that they don't exist. But when they exist, they're important because they are your competition. And in the principle of substitution, which is sort of our fundamental principle that guides how we select our comparable sales, the principle of substitution cares very much about what other options your buyer might have. So, as an example, let's say that we're appraising your property and it's a lender transaction. Okay, so we've got a buyer who's agreed to pay something. It's been negotiated. As on the appraisal side, part of what we do is analyze the contract, so we see your contract price. And so let's say that your buyer has agreed to pay $550,000. We go to look at our sales and we analyze our market conditions in the course of every appraisal assignment. And so, we've got some closed sales that are, that make your contract price seem reasonable. But we've also got 2 or 3 or a handful of active listings that are not under contract, which means they are immediately available to your buyer or any buyer like them. And those active listings are all cheaper. And there's really no discernible reason why. Okay? So, when I say no discernible reason why, we're looking at the photographs and the condition seems similar to the subject. We are looking at the home's stats and functionality and overall appeal, the yard, the location, all these other important factors. Everything seems to be very comparable to the subject, and yet these sales their list prices, their asking prices are less than what your buyer has agreed to pay for the subject. And so in situations like that, the appraiser starts to ask why. Why does your buyer want the subject when it's more expensive than these other options, and there's no discernible reason why it's more expensive than those other options? Now, this is not always the case, but it is sometimes the case, maybe even often the case, that when we look at that contract, your buyer is getting some sort of non-real estate consideration or non-real estate concession in the contract. Okay, that could be closing costs, it could be cash closing costs that help them pay for their the title transfer fees and all the other fees that go into it. It could be cash at closing that helps them buy down their rate so they can afford the payment based on that asking price or that contract price they've agreed on. There could be furniture. There's sometimes furniture thrown in. I have seen cars. I have seen John Deere tractors. And then there's there can be personal property on the site, like above ground pools or storage sheds. All sorts of things can be thrown into a real estate transaction that are not real estate. Well, your lender is only lending on the real estate, and your appraiser's assignment is to only appraise the value of the real estate. So anything else that gets lumped into this transaction has to be excluded from that opinion of value, or it has to be given a value of 0. So I think I made another video about that a long time ago, giving you my 2 cents on how to handle all those non-real estate items. They need to be short. The short version is keep them out of the purchase and sale contract. Talk to your broker about that, and they will probably give you the same advice. But anyway, it often happens that in that contract there are other considerations than just the value of the real estate that are causing the buyer to pay more. And when we look at the active listings and they're all cheaper, but the buyer hasn't chosen them, it seems to be that a lot of times the reason why is maybe they couldn't get all that extra stuff in those houses. And so they'd prefer to have the subject as long as they can finance all this extra stuff that they're getting. Okay? So on the appraisal side, it starts to become an issue that starts to throw up red flags that we need to look harder at what's going on with the market conditions. We need to consider that maybe these closed sales are old sales and they're not reflective of the most current market conditions. And we can, if that's the case, if we can prove that, we can adjust those down. But that can be one very good reason that the active listings are in there. At its core, they're in there for the principle of substitution because we want to answer the question, why didn't your buyer choose these houses when they're readily available? Now, that answer is not always easy to answer. It doesn't always, come down to this sort of scenario I just laid out for you because, sometimes people just want what they want. I might think all these houses are the same. Your buyer might disagree. But I guess on that note, it's also important to note out we're not really just trying to get into the mind of your buyer. We are trying to get into the mind of the average buyer. So if your buyer is a little bit particular, then they might not, their opinion might not apply, and they still might have some sort of issue based on these active listings. I might be the particular one. I'm usually not, but I might be. And maybe I need to make sure I'm not projecting my own biases onto my opinion of these active listings. So that is one of the reasons. I'm trying to think quickly about other reasons. I'll tell you, the lender wants active listings in the report because in the scenario I just described to you, where the closed sales are higher than the active listings, we might be looking at a market that's declining or temporarily in a lull or a slump. Sometimes that can be seasonal, sometimes it can be systemic. But a lot of times the lender wants active listings in there. In the language that they use is that it's in a changing market. So their interpretation of those active listings sometimes is that they are, again, like maybe the most relevant immediate things because all the closed sales are coming from the past. These active listings are relevant right now today, even though they can change. And a lot of times the lender wants or expects those active listings to be higher than the subject or higher than the contract price in their asking prices. I think from their perspective, that's the easiest way to answer the question, why didn't your buyer select these? It sort of has some assumptions that aren't necessarily always true baked into it, but ultimately it's up to the appraiser to explain these things to them. But they want them in there to sort of account for changing markets and be the most recent thing available. And again, back to something I mentioned at the beginning, we're typically reconciling our opinion of value to closed sales. And you typically, a lot of times, we won't get into problems with the active listings except when they start to throw up red flags, like in the scenario I mentioned. The absence of active listings could be because your buyer has no other alternative. And at the beginning of my appraisal career, that was almost always the case. We couldn't put any active listings, or maybe more than one active listing in a report, because it simply weren't available. And the absence of those sales, our inability to find any, was a legitimate reason to explain why the list price on the subject was $550,000 and your buyer is paying $625, because there were multiple offers. There were 30 offers on this house, and it got run up $75,000. And the absence of active listings of other options for your buyer or any other buyer is exactly why that was occurring. It's not so much the case anymore, in most of the time. But again, that's sort of how some of the importance of active listings. It's some of the information that they convey to the appraiser and the readers after us, and the information that we're gleaning from them. So I hope that's helpful. If you ever need an appraisal and a pre-listing, or your client calls you with, they need an appraisal for an estate sale or some other private work, we're happy to help you with that. We are always love to do your professional measurements, because we love to see you doing some of the most important due diligence that I think you can do in your pre-listing work. But you can find us for any of that stuff, as well as consultations, on appraiserpool.com. And as always, I thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.